Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
And what we are going to talk about is what we learned in this process about creation of assistive technology, and why we learned why we need a technology ecosystem, and what the technology ecosystem is all about is what we are going to share. So it's about designing an assistive technology ecosystem for the visually impaired. And before we go to the technology ecosystem, I know you all have had a large dose about disability, and there are experts also in this team here right now. But a little bit of overview, a bird's eye view on disability and the evolving nature of the concept of disability as we perceive it will be important for us, so that we can place Vision Empowers activities in that light. So as most of you know, and in the morning I think Jaljit also discussed a lot about the medical model. So if you look at disability as a concept, right from the 1970s, the definition of disability was about a classification. It was about giving a taxonomy to the word. It's about classifying people with disabilities under various buckets, and there were 9 of these, and then there were subcategories under each one of those. So eventually it was about creating a framework of understanding the context of each disability, and the policies that were created was around each kind of disability. So it was about classifying people who fell under each of these. Now by the 80s, basically this model continued, this individual medical model. And you basically had a system where any disability was like a handicap in society, but was the root cause of which was a disease, a medical problem. So the solutions which were created for those were also around the medical model. Always there was something to do with the individual medical model. Slowly towards the end of that decade, there were gradually critiques of this model, and people started talking about disability not being a product of pathology, right? It was a specific social and economic perspective that needed to change, right? And that became eventually talked about a lot. People started writing about it, and this went on for quite some time. But it was only in the, about maybe the early 2000s is when the concept of disability, the perspective changed a little further, where now the United Nations came out with the CPRD and all of that. And then you basically had the concept of mental and intellectual and sensory impairment being included within the framework of disability. And it was about then participation of these people in society on an equal basis with others. And at that time, disabilities became more than a social problem. It was something that required not just participation in terms of being physically present, but also in terms of mental participation. Now, at the same time, you will notice that along this time, as the concept of disability, the perspective of disability changed over decades, in parallel, there was another great change happening, and that was to do with technologies. Technologies also parallelly were changing. And if you around that time, this was a famous quote from Stephen Hawking, who said that disability need not be an obstacle to success, because he was successful despite being so disabled. And what he said, in this entire statement was, he recognized that though he was able to succeed in what he was doing, he said majority of people with disabilities in the world have an extremely difficult time. So it began to dawn on people by then that it would not be possible to solve the problem just by creating, technologies or being able to address a particular section of people. And by 2014 is when you see that the United Nations comes out with a statement saying millions of people with disabilities are denied education, and many more education is available. Many more education is available only when they're in isolation. So this is when you start recognizing that there's a huge number of people who fall under the disability, umbrella. And you learnt about it in the morning about, the different age group spectrum, all the different kinds of disabilities. This section of the population is roughly 15% of the world's population now is considered to be disabled. That is when people take notice of it, and it does not remain even a social, forget a physical problem or a mental problem, not even a social welfare problem. It becomes a humanitarian issue. It becomes a development issue. Now the governments needed to start ratifying whatever the United Nations was publishing, or, each one needed to go back to their country and, create bills, pass bills and all that. And also along with that, like I said, for the assistive technologies were becoming another policy objectives by the United Nations. So this was going on in parallel. So by 2015, you find that accessible and in ICTs became a major policy objective for the persons with disabilities. Now, once it became a development issue, one very important thing that got recognized, as you saw in the previous slide about the education, being one of the most critical elements, right, in development. So this is where you come up with, the United Nations comes up with the, acknowledgement that inclusive education is required for all, where all students can, study together in the same classroom maybe. And how was that going to be possible? So one is, like we said, all kinds of technologies, accessible technologies, assistive technologies needed to get rolled out, and all countries needed to ratify this. And this is what happened. By 2007, India also ratified it. But if you notice, despite all this, it was only in 2016 that India actually implemented the new rights for persons with disabilities. And this is a very, interesting statement in that bill. It says that it provides individual autonomy, including the freedom to make one's own choices, right? So this is what legally every disabled person in this country is entitled to. The freedom to choose what they want to study, how they want to move around, where they want to live, what job they want to do. These are all granted by the law, right? Now we basically come to, since we've come to, the context, we've kind of presented to you how disability changed as a perspective, and we've come to India. We've basically realized that, okay, this is the challenge. Vidya will tell you about what is the magnitude of the challenge as far as India is concerned.
We have 285 million people who are visually impaired, this is in the world, and 90% of them are in developing countries. So here, when we refer to visually impaired, so it doesn't mean completely blind. Okay, so the visual impairment can range between different levels. So there are people who are completely blind, there are those who can see little, then legally blind, and some of them cannot see very little. So there are different whole range of people among the visually impaired. And 39 million people in the world are completely blind, and 246 million have severe or moderate visual impairment. And out of this, 1/3 of the world's blind population are in India. So here we should note that 1/6 of the population in the world are in India, out of which out of like 1/3 of the blind population are in India, but 1/6 of the world's population are in India. Why is it so? Because many people are just not aware of eyesight related issues. Most of them are preventable cases of blindness. That's why 90% of the people in developing countries have visual impairment. And out of the Indian blind population, there are just 0.77 million, which is like 7.7 lakh people attend school. So there are 11 lakh children who are in the age group 5 to 19, but out of which only 68% attend school. So this is the status, and when coming to STEM education, so there are less than 100 people who are visually impaired who have studied STEM related courses in graduate and postgraduate level. So this is just 11 lakh children are in this generation. Now imagine how many generations have gone by. Out of all these generations, just 100 students have taken STEM education, science, technology and such courses in graduate and postgraduate level. So this is the magnitude of the problem in India.
Yeah. So basically, this to highlight the magnitude of STEM, the problem of STEM education for the visually impaired. This is what Helen Keller told. Vidya, can you share that?
Yeah. So Helen Keller wrote this. So when she was there, she says algebra and geometry are the only courses which she found it difficult.
And remember, this is in 1898.
So math was one of the toughest subjects for her, and because a whole lot of issues were existing even then. She tells something about her college, that the college wasn't aware of how to cater to her needs and how they should teach her math courses. So this was long back when she was alive.
Yeah, and so about 120 years later, now in her country, ICTs are existing now in developed countries, which can make, there is enough research and more to show that ICTs do help in education of the visually impaired. It helps them to pick up science and math education, and there are teachers who actually use those. You can see here these technology names are there, which basically these are used. The question is, where are they being used and who's using them, and how is it affordable by everybody, right? So now juxtapose this to India. 120 years later in India now, how is this?
Yeah, so as you saw in the previous slide, that there are a lot of technologies that are used in developed countries like US, but here in India we still have an issue. Like when we go to one of the schools, so there are computers. It's not like there are no computers. Many people donate computers to blind schools because they feel that they can use it. But computers are functional. The issue is not even like they're not working. They're working and they're in good conditions. And people have computer classes. The kids have computer classes. But for what purpose they're being used? It's like when you go to the school and ask them, they just tell computer is equal to Word and Excel. So just they type something on the keyboard and save it in Word. So these are the basic functionalities that people use in a computer right now in India, and they don't use it for any academic purposes. So in Karnataka we have 45 blind schools, out of which there's only one school that is teaching math and science in 10th grade. This is the case in most of the states in India. So people drop out math, right from math and science, right from 5th grade or 7th grade, because the government has given them alternate subjects like music, political science and so on, because it's an assumption that visually impaired people cannot study science and math.
Yeah. So basically this is the finding that, if there are 45 schools for the blind in Karnataka and there's only one school which is allowing science and math after class 7. So the problem really needs attention, right? So now what is it that technologists are to do? So if you look at this entire problem, so, to grapple with issues of inaccessibility and exclusion, what is required now? One thing you came out in the previous slide is that there are technologies and those technologies are not affordable. So affordability is one issue, why you don't have enough technologies in the schools which can enable the children to study science and math, right? But if you look at it, what is it besides price that is coming in the way? The first thing that you would see is that during the design of these assistive technologies, there is a lack of sensitivity in the design, right? There's a lack of sensitivity to the disabled community. When I'm writing code or I'm designing a hardware, the person who's designing it wouldn't really think of that community as being the users of whatever we are designing. So this lack of design sensitivity again is due to what? It's due to the exclusion of the visually impaired or any disabled person in the design process. So when you're creating assistive technologies, you basically are not taking inputs from that community because they are a minority and you think they're not users, like what Joyjeet said in the morning about visibility of this community. They're not visible, you don't see them as users, so you don't consider, and they themselves are not part of the design process. Now the question is, if they are not part of the design process, why are they not part of the design process? If you were today to expect that I as a visually impaired person should give you inputs, today morning you saw the demo of JAWS and you know there are other assistive technologies which help. But consider a situation where you designed a technology to begin with which was accessible and you did not need an assistive technology like JAWS, right? We didn't think of that when we were designing the technology, right? And why we didn't think about it? And like, if you want that, visually impaired people or hearing impaired people or others join this community of designers, then you would have to have them, first of all, educated in STEM studies. You would have to have them go for higher education in STEM. And how would they go for higher education in STEM? First thing is they need to study science and math in school, right? And then you can think of them going for higher studies in STEM and then become designers and then give inputs. So it's like a whole vicious cycle, which is the root cause of this problem. And this eventually leads to what everybody is crying about, the underrepresentation of these people in the STEM field, everywhere in the developed countries as well. Now we come to now you kind of have an idea of the broad scenario where Vision Empower was born. And the Vision Empower, motivation of Vision Empower is Vidya herself. She is a graduate of this institute. She was a gold medalist in the MSc Digital Society program of the 2017 batch. And she's an inspiration in herself. She has had tremendous, determination and grit to fight the system and take up science and math. And she took math in her bachelor's, and then later she joined IIITB for the Masters in Digital Society, which she eventually taught. And after she graduated, she decided to work on projects to help the visually impaired study science and math. So that was what we set out with. So we started this. And Vidya, can you share what the vision and mission of Vision Empower was in your view?
Yeah, so we wanted to, vision was to enable every visually impaired person to have an inclusive education so that they can reach their full potential. And mission was because we wanted to teach math and science, but just like anybody else, the quality of education shouldn't be compromised. That's why we had to make it inclusive, and mission was to make science and math accessible to visually impaired students, because we already told you what was the problem.
So now, given that we understood broadly that, okay, this is a vision that we want for the organization, this is a mission, we want to basically make science and math STEM education accessible to these visually impaired students. But overall, we had to come up with, we didn't know what to do exactly. So we came up with a mandate. We said we would first need to go and identify the challenges. Okay, one is Vidya herself had experienced had experiences. There's also a TED talk of hers on the net. You can locate her. So there were a bunch of experiences, but we really needed to go to the schools to identify what were the day-to-day challenges that were faced by the children today, and then come up with, ideas to deal with the problems that they were facing, and then even go about thinking of solving this big challenge. And then we had to come up with what are the initiatives we could take and how to prioritize those. So for this, we came up with a plan, and the first year, this last 1.5 years, we've basically been on the research phase, discovery phase. Maybe she can quickly say what we wanted to do in the research phase.
So what we did was, I had some insights because I had gone through the system, but we didn't want to conclude that this is the scenario right now because it was few years back, so like 2011 I passed out of school. So first what we did was we did some research, secondary research and primary research as well. Secondary research to see if there are some reports. We found some of them by XRCVC, which is other organization in Mumbai. So they have done some research. Then we wanted to see if this scenario exists in schools in Karnataka. So we had to do primary data collection. So we went to schools, did some observations, had the teachers' trainings and everything, and we came up with some data. Then we had to find out some requirements for our solutions, basically what to focus on and what are the requirements that are there. And then we had some proof of concepts, prototype. And then we can't do this all by ourselves because.
So we will come to that shortly. So basically, what was there was that the first year we focused more on research. We used various research methods to understand and go with a pilot. I'll skip this. So basically, the first year was the discovery phase to try and understand, and come up with a strategy so that we would be able to enable the VI students with STEM. So. I will not go into, too much detail of what we did. We basically followed an ethnographic approach where it was a mixed approach. We sat in observation in the classrooms, in the teacher trainings, in the, various engagements that the blind students would have in, say labs and other places. And we also, started networking with all the various players who were in this space, who were already working in this space. So, having done that, so there are a few, examples of us, how we engaged with the schools in the, community. These are all some of the things we just tried to understand what was being done. So we have a kind of a summary of all the people we interviewed, more than 100 people maybe, various organizations, some working professionals, some sighted people who work with them, right? And after all of this, we basically identified what were the main areas of concern, right? One is that you can just kind of go with the interview data and understand, but we tried and applied what we had learned here in the IT and society area about doing qualitative research, and we use those methods to basically come up and bucketize what were the main problems, right? So the main areas of concern, what we found in the field, could be, summarized as these 4. The first was that you did not have accessible content. First thing, if we think of our children going to school, or all of us who are sighted here who went to school, the first thing that we think of about school is what? What do you think of first when you go to school?
Paper, pen.
Books, right? Paper, pen, books, right? Without a book, you can't even think of studying, right? Trust me, these children do not have books. They sit in class and they take notes on their, braille pad for whatever they are capable of. By the time they gain speed in braille, they are in high school. And by then, whatever they've learned is pretty much by hearing in the classroom. So that is the first problem. You don't have accessible content. Even if you had, there are people, very well-meaning people, volunteers who come to school, they read the books to them, right? Or sometimes they give them recordings also nowadays. They give them some, SD cards and stuff like that. But these children do not have access to a way to reinforce that learning. So while you have some content in some way, there's no way they go and do, like we don't even do homework. Are you going to do math without doing math homework? Never, right? You need practice. All that just doesn't happen because you don't have the content from which you're going to do the homework. If you don't have the book, how are you going to do that? First thing. So that is the biggest thing, and that there was basically a lack of awareness. The fact is it's been going on for decades, but nobody in the school, nobody in the system seemed to even miss a book. When we were going to the schools and asking, okay, so how did you do this? Oh no, we did it. So how do you do it in class? I sat through a test. I myself sat through a test. And at the end of the classroom, at the end of the period, I walked out of the classroom an utter failure because I would never have been able to solve the problem the way the problem was being given to them and they were expected to solve it on their tailor frame. Everything was oral. Okay. So this is the first problem. The second problem was, if today you are talking about these children, you want them to study, you want them to have content also, you have to be able to teach them, right? How many teachers even in the regular schools that we have, right? The schools for the sighted, you will not get a teacher without a B.Ed degree. Every teacher has to have a minimum B.Ed degree. You go to their schools, most of the teachers are class 10 or class 12 pass. Okay, they don't have the qualification to teach, but they are teaching. Trust me, they are very good teachers. They are very well-meaning. They are very kind. They really want to help. They do a very good job. Given the constraints that they are in, they do a very good job. But they are not qualified. Most of the 50% of them are blind. Am I right, Vidya? 50% of them are blind themselves. They have not learned science and math in school. But because you don't have teachers who are up for the job, these people are teaching. And whenever we would go to the school, they would, even now, they basically come to us to ask us, tell us how we should teach. What should we tell so that I can explain? I don't know how to explain. One teacher once told me, I don't know how to explain how a pyramid looks because it says it's like a mountain. I don't know how a mountain looks. Right? So the context itself is not there. How do you explain? Look at the books themselves, the content in the books. It will say, it will draw a curve, a parabola, and say it looks like an L-shaped curve or a U-shaped curve. What is L? What is U? Have they ever seen? That context is not there. So therefore, the teaching community again is one group of people that we really needed to understand much better and try to help. So that's one. The third thing, like what we began with about, the rolling out of technologies, of the infrastructure required, toolkits required and other things required to teach these subjects. If you focus only on science and math, forget the other subjects because we can't be focusing on everything, we focus on science and math. And if you look at science and math, you need certain tools and gadgets to be able to make that, convey the message and the concept to them. There were hardly anything in the schools, and even if there were, they were not being used. It's not that there are not, there are. There is an NIVH. Yeah.
Sorry to break you. Just had a question there. When you said about teacher community not being really active, so is there a proper content for teacher education itself, especially for blind, at least in
there is.
Otherwise?
Yes. So, and that's what I was just coming to right now. That NIVH exists, national, right? So, NIVH has teacher training courses. There are, all the metros have it, even some other cities have it. I'll come to you. Okay, they have it, but what they teach there is very generic. It's a special education course, and they'll teach the teacher to, do this. When the teacher goes back to school, the teacher there is no way for you to understand whether the teacher is really using it in school or not. First, and you need to have, it's not easy actually. Honestly speaking, it's not easy. So these people, when they go back to the school also, very few actually get to using those tools and teaching them, using them in the classroom. For example, you have a geometry kit which is about this big, right? About, a foot long, at least if not more, the geometry kit. Now imagine every child using that kit for doing, drawing. Not that it's not possible, it's possible. But the time it takes You can't have a 45-minute period where, you focus on a class has a minimum of 12 children for the teacher to focus on each child. So that is where, the role of technology and infrastructure, where you need something out of what was happening in the box last few decades, right? Yeah. Sorry.
Ma'am, the faculties in diploma in education.
Yes.
So there is one course, right?
Yes, special education, D.Ed courses there. Yeah.
So is it different from special school and the government school or the general school?
No.
Faculty who are teaching.
In fact, you know what? Out of the 45 schools that in Karnataka that are especially for the blind, most are private schools. Only maybe 5 or 6 are government schools. The rest are all private schools. So the infrastructure and many of these are run by social organizations, charitable trusts and stuff like that. So there is the intention to, but putting everything together somehow is not happening, and we'll analyze why it's not happening.
Like also special education that they're doing, they include a lot of other disabled
they do
disabilities,
absolutely
like
right.
autism,
Yes. So when they are teaching special education, they teach everything as a group, because they do it for maybe 2 years and they'll teach everything. So the focus, first of all, focusing only on visually impaired, and then focusing only on science and math. This doesn't happen. Many of the teachers who go there are themselves visually impaired. So, for them to actually learn that, and then because they've never studied it in school, then come back and teach. So it's kind of, the task is very huge. So we will go a little quickly, I'm not finished. So then, the most important one is probably the last one, where there is a myth and we think that this person cannot see, so that person cannot think. Right? It's our perspective that we impose on that person. We don't know what they... Honestly speaking, I don't blame anybody, because I think all of us who have gone to, regular schools which have not had a visually impaired person in the class or a hearing impaired person in the class, will not appreciate it, because it doesn't come in our data. They're not visible. They're not there in the classroom. So we don't know, right? The system itself has been like this. And so there's a myth. It's been percolating for years that, they will, this is not for them. In fact, forget about that. It was like, even last year, I was talking to somebody from the University of Leeds. He's doing a PhD in pharma, some kind of thing. He was very interested in working with us, and he was on a call with me. And we were talking to him about the hackathon, about, other things. And that leads to employability and stuff. And he was telling me, why are you doing this? Why don't you actually find out what they are good at and make those trades, and then accordingly create employment? So you can understand with the perspective that comes. We are basically saying we are the ones to decide who's good at what, right? Make those trades and allocate people to them. Like you saw in the morning, you were showing the messieurs, So you basically identify, that person might be, he cannot see, therefore he can hear well, so he must be a musician. So, let him learn singing. After that, even if he cannot do anything else, at least he can go and sit outside, right? So that's what's been happening, right, in this country forever. So that's the myth. And then, the biggest thing what we found is that because of this percolating thing, vicious cycle, there's a big lack of role models. Like she was saying, there were only about 100 people maybe in the whole country who studied science and math in higher education. And now, it's known in education that you do something because you see somebody else has done it. And that does not exist, and therefore, So basically now, to solve these problems, what were the initiatives required? So let's look at each of these buckets. So for accessible science and math content, we said we needed to design modular solutions. We basically needed to create the content. First thing, the content was non-existent. We needed to create the content. Take the book, make the content accessible so that the child will understand. So whatever material is there, write it in such a way, present it in such a way that the child understands that. Second, you make it available to the child in the formats that they understand. You give them audio files, you give them braille books, you give them, diagrams which are tactile, whatever. Try and solve the problem through creating these kind of solutions give a child a kit so that, for every, chapter, they will have something to fall back upon, right? So that was the first thing. That was the first initiative required. The second thing was about the instructors, right? So for the instructors, you basically, like we just now discussed, you needed a pool of certified teachers. Now, certified, quote unquote, does not mean purely NIVH certified or, special education certified, but for the job at hand, right? And something, we needed to design something for that.
So this,
Right.
like, is it, how different is it teaching mathematics to a visual impact student and non-visual impact student?
So consider this, okay? You are trying to teach a child the area of a triangle, right? So what you would do is you would draw a triangle, you will draw the perpendicular, and then you will say this is the formula you use, and you will explain. Very, very visual, right? You need the board, you need to draw, you need to be able to explain it in terms of maybe even if you're a really good teacher, you will give examples from real world. You'll take applications, take your something and say that or maybe touch something and see. You'll put things together and explain. The biggest problem that teachers in these schools have is they don't have a reference context. They don't know with what they can explain so that the child will understand. And because they're not being able to draw on the board and there is nothing else, so usually what they will do is they will go with some strings and wool or something, or a Velcro at best, and make a tactile picture and try to explain. And how many people have the patience to do that, right? So that is why the challenge comes. But yes, there are
needs. Like the last point, you say that people have to be discouraged or encourage people to pursue others. They feel they're good.
Yeah.
Would this be a projection of their own cluelessness?
Absolutely. That's absolutely what we feel that has been the case forever. Is that because we don't know how to teach them, we think that they cannot teach them.
And one more thing is like, suppose you want to explain a human body, okay, so if it's a sighted child, you might draw it, it looks like a 2D thing. So the same diagram, if you even make it accessible and show it to a visually impaired student, he or she wouldn't be able to get it. You need 3D stuff for all the complex 2D diagrams. You need a 3D representation for them to understand. Like most solutions are designed the way sighted people can see and how they can grasp. So when you look at it from a visually impaired person's point of view, the context and the way it's delivered and the way it's understood and retained, everything changes, especially in these dynamic representations.
And higher math?
Higher math, it's completely like, for example, calculus and all of it. So it's a very big problem because they don't allow computers to your exams, and then you have to do most of it orally, and you have a lot of issues like scribes, those who write for you are in some lower grades. I had experienced like one whole year I struggled, and at the end of the exam, someone takes my hand and they'll just like draw some circle and one line and they'll look, this is how this is there in the paper. So I don't understand. I go home and find out it's theta. So it's such a complex problem. Firstly, you don't have books and you don't have scribes to write your exam. So it's like a magnitude of problems.
So it's you're absolutely right that it's a perspective that we need to turn the mirror on ourselves and come back and see. So we'll see, instead of getting into, we'll try to understand how we analyze this problem, right? So therefore the need for all this. So to be able to do this, we needed to create a pool of teachers. For the infrastructure and technology aids, we needed to design assistive technologies, and to basically bust the myths, we needed to engage with existing role models and kind of create more awareness, beat the drum a little more, right? Now, obviously you can see, if this is the mandate that we are going to do, solving, addressing each one of these challenges itself, it's mammoth, right? Each one in itself is a huge problem to solve. So therefore we decided that, let's go in a slightly theoretical way, right? Try to understand, because people have researched it. People have researched these problems over the years. People have tried to address it. Nobody has done all of this on purpose. Whatever happened is not on purpose. Like, you can't blame the whole of humanity for, the problems that arose to a group of people. But the fact is, it arose because of certain changes in society. And that's why I know the first bit of disability and, it's like repetitive and gets boring. But it was very important for us to present that part, because that evolution of the concept of and perspectives on disability, why it changed and when it changed, is very important. And you'll see how we tap on that to come up with our solutions. So basically, if you look at it, basically what we did is, after all that, going to the field work and collecting the data from all these various quarters, we decided to go in a very theoretical framework way and try to understand who has said what about, these kind of studies. We found a very interesting framework, which is called the biopsychosocial framework, developed by George Engel. This particular framework gives equal weightage to 3 aspects: biological, psychological, and social. So like what you saw, that the concept of disability was changing from a medical model to a social model to eventually a humanitarian problem, right? But if you look at how then to solve the problem also, you need to understand all the perspectives. It's not like when you when you understood that it was a social problem, the medical problem didn't stop occurring. It was still there, right? When you finally decided it was a development issue, the social issue did not stop, right? It was still there. So when you want to analyze the magnitude of the problem, you need to understand that your solutions need to be tuned to be receptive to these signals, right? And therefore we found this very, very effective, and all our future work was kind of around this. So the biopsychosocial enabled technology solutions, what we felt was a few of these which we found that we would probably need to work on. One was, the first thing that I told you was the content, right? The books did not exist, right? So we needed something called a refreshable braille display. Vidya, you want to talk about the braille display and why you need it?
Yeah, so refreshable braille display is like the children who are reading the content, or the users, can read in braille, but the content that is digital can be directly converted into braille using actuators, and the person who is reading can touch and feel.
Yeah, but why do we need that?
Why do we need it is because now there are 12 students in a class, for example, so each student should have one book. Now for example, you write 1 page of print, that is equal to like 3 pages in braille, and these papers have to be special braille papers which are thick. So for one chapter you just need one entire book. So one cited textbook.
That's the magnitude of the problem. You basically have a book of 30, something of 30 pages, which comes to about more than 100 pages of braille, which is triple its size. And you have to print it using special equipment, and then and the child can never carry it around, right? Forget about, So that is the reason also, partly, that, it was not there. The books were not there. It's very difficult and an expensive affair to print. If there was one book in the class, it would be with the teacher. That way, if the teacher is, visually impaired. Otherwise, there would be no book. Now, to solve that problem, we found that this is the most important thing that we need to first create, a refreshable braille display. Now, such devices exist. There are such devices in the market. You can go abroad and buy somewhere between the range of $3,000 to $5,000 each. So, can you give that to every child? No, right? So that's why the quotation around affordable. So that's the first technology we started looking for and trying to put a team together to work. So that is one. The second,
$5,000 is for a single actuator.
No. For a single display which has about 20 cells, 20 to 40 cells. Each
that's the refreshable
braille display. Yeah. I can, if you are around, sometime we can show you one which will. Yeah. So now there are Indian versions available. 1 or 2 companies have come up with refreshable braille displays of, with the minimum price about 25 to 30,000 rupees. You are getting But even that is not affordable. Like we told you, right? 90% of these people come from rural and poor families that they cannot afford. So even 25-30 is very expensive for them. 30 rupees. And
is the price high because of scale? I've seen this.
Yes, partly.
It's because of scale.
Partly, yes. Partly, and also partly because it's very niche technology.
And is it a monopoly?
It's not exactly a monopoly. In fact, I know people who work on this, and right now we are also working. What they are doing is basically they're opening up what they have. Like, the design is open design. So I wouldn't say it's monopoly. At the same time, yeah, there are so for example, now in the Scandinavian countries, it's highly subsidized because whatever is the price, it doesn't matter. The government will buy it and give it to every blind person. So they have one at hand always. But this doesn't. All countries cannot afford that, so it's not possible.
So as a policy, maybe that's the better option, right? See, because of the volume, of course, there are limitations. So definitely government has to fix in some way.
Yeah, the role of the government certainly is there. But again, we also didn't go to that stage where, we're able to make a judgment on what was right and what was wrong. What we recognize is that, yeah, this happened. And right now also we are even able to talk of refreshable braille display because the technology has developed till there. Right? If that had not happened, then we wouldn't even be talking about it. And trust me, that would not have happened if the economy wasn't open for people to innovate on. And obviously, if people are innovating, they will want to see returns on their intellectual property. So there is no right or wrong in it. Yes, but the government playing a role certainly from the policy side, from the involvement side, all that is certainly.
The options are that to develop an affordable technology.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Then so each one has its own challenges.
Yeah.
The second option is that let's not focus on that. There is a solution. Okay, let's work on something which wherein masses can afford it. Right? Instead of looking at a technology, let's look at the support and make it affordable for the masses. I think that's
so making it affordable is it's not like if we are trying that, right? But it's let me assure you, it's not an easy thing because you have to make the technology affordable. Means what? It's something that you're trying to achieve. There's one thing about design. If you are trying to design smartphone, you will want, even however cheap the phone is, you will want all the features of the iPhone in it. Yes or no? Yeah. That's what we desire. So same way, even if you are making an affordable technology, you cannot compromise on the features. Right? So that's where the challenges come.
The same like electric car, in my view.
Yeah.
Just trying to compare.
Yeah.
Electric car today cannot compete with the other cars from a cost perspective. So whatever R&D you do it, so even best minds they're putting in their efforts, but they're not able to meet the pricing. So what is happening is government is coming into the picture, saying that they are incentivizing. So I feel
certainly government has a role. I agree with you.
Probably that can be the thing.
Yeah, what role I don't know. Now whether just paying off for everyone is a solution. Or what? There are many ways the government has. It's not the government. I won't say that has not been. There is today every company that has to give 2% of its funds for CSR, right? So there is a way, if not directly, indirectly, that the government is trying to. From whom?
The equipment. Is there a direct subsidy
by the government? No.
I think
not just that, the government earlier importing braille devices, braille printer and all was duty free. Now they charge a huge sum if you import because they want you to make it here. Yeah.
So one more challenge is that there's not only braille display that's required for STEM education.
Yeah.
There are a whole lot of technologies. Now when you think of making everything like this subsidy model, that's not going to work because there are a whole lot of technologies. Just by reading braille, you are not going to learn science and math.
And when you work with the government, just to quickly intervene here, so when you work with the government and you go into the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, we want more subsidies for, say, refreshable braille display. The secretary over there will say, there are so many more basic things for which the funds need to be allocated. This is far higher in the agenda. So often the priorities doesn't match, and the funds are always limited to this ministry. So hence, many times, even if they want, they are not able to do it. There is a scheme called ADEPT scheme where they do provide some financial support, but many times the quality of material which is procured is very substandard.
True. So that was the first thing. Then, basically in addition, you needed to, what we figured is, like I told you, the content itself wasn't there. So we needed to ensure that whatever the books contain, right, they should be there on an online platform. Now that you have MOOCs and you have everything else, so it should be but it should be accessible to the visually impaired child. So we decided to basically try and come up with an accessible online platform, and which will have the content. And it will not just have the content, it will also have the instruction kit. Like you said, does the teacher know how to teach, right? No, they don't. The answer is they don't. So then how do you solve this? So try and, first of all, we'll tell you how else we do. But in the LMS, we're trying to come up with, an instruction kit which the teacher can follow and at least, conduct the class. Then coming up with the training curriculum for teachers, and then other games and tools. So these were some. Then creating the laboratory. Laboratory is one of the most inaccessible places for visually impaired people, right? So how to make it accessible, and then how to be able to finally be able to ensure that these people network with the entire STEM community, right? So that was it. So this is all what we needed to do. So what we using that biopsychosocial framework, like I said, we came up with this is unfortunately it's a graphic, Ankit. It's basically, what we did is we tried to analyze. Now I showed you the whole problem set is huge. If you were to solve it and thinking the Vision Empowered will go alone and solve all of these problems, it won't happen in my lifetime. I don't know how many lifetimes, right? So what we decided to do was work with a partner ecosystem where we can make it happen. There are many people in this space who are working on various things in their own areas, and each one is working in some niche space. So when we looked at the ecosystem that exists today, we found that you can broadly group it into 4 large groups. One are the people who are the pedagogy experts. They create the books. They write the books, right? So they are one group. There is another group who are the resource providers. So, for example, in Bangalore, there are 2 or 3 large resource providers who provide the Braille books on demand, free of cost. Okay, they provide it to the child. So if the child actually goes to that say Matruchaya or a Mitra Jyoti and says, I need these books, please give it to me, they will give it, print and give, right? So that is the kind of, plus other teacher trainings and all that, they try to, work on those things. Then there are the technology firms. Now, like a Microsoft or, other firms who basically are creating assistive technologies to help with education. And then there are specific assistive technology labs nowadays, and many of the large engineering colleges and other science STEM related colleges, you have assistive technology labs who are trying to work on state-of-the-art assistive technology. So broadly, this is the supply side. They are trying to address the problems. And on the demand side, of course, you have the schools who have the needs, who raise the demands, and so this is what we found it is, and we decided that if we have to work, then we have to collaborate with everybody and work. We have to ensure that everybody knows what the other is doing. Most of what we found is that there are many NGOs who are working in this space. Then the resource providers like Matruchaya, Mitra Jyoti, XRCVC, they have their resources. So we try to work with them on, having the teacher training programs and so on and so forth. For the technology firms, we are trying to create partnerships wherein those technologies which I said we will create. Now we are just a 1 year old organization. Creating a huge team of technology experts is a dream, right? We have just 1 or 2 people right now. But what we are doing is we are collaborating with these other technology firms and trying to come up with a model. And I'll tell you how that works out. And then there are other technology labs. Now, being in IITB, this is another collaborative effort which is we are trying to kind of create, where basically it's like an academia industry partnership, where basically we leverage on the knowledge of the experts here at IIT and the student pool that you have here to come up with technology solutions. So that's how we work, and we have a couple of schools who are our partners where we are trying out these solutions, pilot solutions.
Are these schools in Kanpur?
Yes, right now Bangalore, because eventually, but there is already, like, because of some of the things that we have done, there is already people are calling us, asking us to go and try it in their schools, but we would do it probably later once we have a proof of concept which is verified. So so for the content that we created, the books, the tactile diagrams, and all of those, we basically had this proof of concept program called Anubhav, where we brought the children, we tried our material, we some of the experiential learning concepts were tried with them, and based on that, then we proceeded with creating more material. Then we created the teacher training program. So this was so the first one about content was tried out through this proof of concept Anubhav. The teacher training program called Pragya, which we have, where we basically we work with the special education teachers. We split the whole curriculum for the whole year into 3 trimesters, and for every trimester we bring the teachers over and we run through the whole curriculum, and we basically the special education teachers teach them how to go back and teach, because otherwise it will not be a scalable model. The current teacher needs to learn how to teach. Of course, you need to create more teachers, but the current teacher also needs to. So we organize these every trimester. Another one is coming up in January. And then we have these technology projects which we have initiated along with IIT Bangalore. So the first one, like I told you, the LMS which was created, so which is being created. It's an accessible LMS which is to follow. I'm sure Ankit has trained you on now you understand the need for accessibility. So we went with a particular platform which is open, and we tried to make it accessible, and then we are putting in the content in there. Then we basically, like Vidya was talking about the 3D diagrams, right? You want to talk about the 3D tactile?
Yeah, so for everything, for most of the complex diagrams, usually the student cannot grasp the concept if there's a 2D representation. So you need a 3D model for which someone cannot manually design those 2D modeling to manually convert 2D model into 3D. So we're trying to design a software with some algorithms which can do that.
Yeah, and also using 3D printing. Yes.
You're doing the software designing here at IIT.
Here at IIT. So the model which we work is like this. The collaborative model is that there's a principal investigator in the institute, and we have a vision empowered engineer, and there are student interns, and together we work on that. So basically, this particular one, like she was saying, is an algorithm basically which will simplify a diagram. So in the book you have so many diagrams, so you take any of the diagram and then you pass it through that algorithm, it simplifies it, and then you basically get an outline of that diagram in a particular way. It sounds much simpler than it is. And
what subject are we talking? We are still talking about math, right?
Math and science both. So you need diagrams for both. Yeah. So for math, actually, good that you raised that question. In math, if you see, most of the diagrams in the math book in schools are very symmetrical, and it's possible to even not use all this. So what we did in the Braille book is we basically found a way to import it into the file which is going to go to the Braille embosser, and therefore I should have brought some samples actually. So and therefore you can print that in a perforated way, so you get raised diagrams. Symmetrical diagrams, we were able to do that. So we printed diagrams on the book using the Braille printer itself.
And graphs.
Graphs also. So like some of them. But like I told you, we are just piloting, right? So it's a class 5 material. But yeah, we have printed graphs. We have also printed graphs using this 3D tactile thing. It's much simpler than biology diagrams. So for that, actually, can you tell them about the labeling?
Yeah, so in science, especially in biology, now when you take a diagram, there are many labels. Some of them might have even 15 labels. So having a braille kind of labels is very difficult because the children will get confused what exactly. Now if you take a cell which is mitochondria, which is ribosome and which is lysosome, so braille is very voluminous, it takes a lot of space. So we are trying to create a solution wherein there will be a diagram, for example a cell which is raised, the student can touch and feel, and when he or she touches a particular part, so it reads out what you're touching and gives some minimal description of what the part is, like mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, something like that.
An audio label.
An audio label. Whenever he or she touches different parts, it's audio label.
Yeah. So these are the other one.
The same about the LMS that is being created.
Yeah.
Did you find something open source in the market?
Yes, we used OpenEdX. Yeah, so we basically, there was a big process. Initially we thought we'll make our own accessible. We took tools, and then we found that it will be very expensive. Then we tried Moodle. Moodle also has many accessibility features. We tried Moodle, but even that was not good enough. And we have one student intern worked for a whole semester doing that. And then finally we then used OpenEdX because it provides its focus on accessibility is much more than any other. But we use that platform, but we have done a lot of customizations, and we will probably be putting back our code back to OpenEdX very soon.
Just one thing about the LMS is like, first, why we need to have separate LMS when there are many is because firstly the software should be completely accessible for a blind person, and secondly we have a lot of online math courses, but it's not like if it's digital a blind person can read it. It's not like that, because when you want to find any equation, for example, on the internet, the screen reader itself doesn't read it for you. It has to be converted into accessible formats such as LaTeX, and there should be a separate plugin which can convert all the equations to words and read it. So the content should be made accessible in a way that screen reader can interpret, and then all the content should be supplemented with a braille material. So when you just give a problem, there should be something, some supplement in tactile format for the child to touch and feel. That and the software should be accessible. So all these three things put together, we decided we have an LMS platform.
So these are the things you have to consider.
Yes, these are the things we had to construct, and that's why So if you initially I began with the biopsychosocial framework, right? So all the technologies we said should imbibe some of that. Should imbibe the fact that it is not solving only a biological problem or only a social problem or only a psychological problem. Many assistive technologies are just created and shoved under the carpet because they are never used, right, Ankit?
Yes, absolutely. Most of them are glorifying the lab's shelves.
Exactly. They just stay there, okay? Nobody uses them. And why? I mean, ideally you would think, there are technologies, and then why are these people not using it, right? They are so unintuitive that, people don't use it. And trust me, this is our research. We basically went and spoke to people who make it. And when we asked them, how did you create it? So they did not even talk to the user before they make it. They go with their own, interpretation of what they want, what the technology should be like. They create it, and then they go and say, try it. It should work. Why are you not using it? What we are basically heading to is exactly what I was trying to say. Is that when we create a device and we are creating a technology because we know that this technology will work as far as we have designed it, so it should work. But who is going to use that device? And what are the parameters that person is going to apply or attributes that person is going to think about when using that device? How many questions come up about, I know it is basically what you're addressing is a biological problem, right? Now, where is the psychological part coming in? Am I thinking about whether the person is ready for it or not? Does he want to be seen using that particular thing or not? Right? There's so much stigma that is attached maybe to that, and they don't want to be seen using it. There are so many various, depends also from which strata of the, society you come, and how you want to be perceived by others. There are so many aspects to it. It's not like we can say that, create it, and of course there's no one single line solution also, but at least when you create a technology, if you consider all these perspectives, then the uptake might be better than what it is. Yeah. And then, so putting all that together, now the question about, what I told you about what we decided to do regarding the perspectives, the myths that are floating around, how to create more awareness, right? So one of the groups which we collaborate with is an iSTEM. It's an inclusive STEM group. Like she was saying, there are about maximum 100 people who are in STEM education and higher education. There are about 25 to 30 people who are in higher education right now, and they have created a self-advocacy team. We partnered with them. And for the first time last year here in IIT, we had the inclusive hackathon. So we basically had, 12 groups of 5 members each, where we brought people from the industry. We had the visually impaired programmers and we had students from IIT. So you had 2 visually impaired programmers, 2 people from industry and 1 IIT student working on a problem. Over 3 days we had the hackathon. And I'll just play this little.
Hi, my name is Karthik, and I am a co-founder at iSTEM. The goal of the iSTEM hackathon was essentially to bring together blind computer science students, corporate professionals, and sighted computer science students together to hack on projects that they're passionate about. And going into the event, we had 3 broad objectives. The first objective was for all of these participants to challenge themselves by working in highly diverse teams. We were sure that they would actually be experiencing a lot that they haven't experienced before, many perspectives that they haven't considered before, and really, challenge and question some of the preconceived notions and biases that they may have about each other. So we wanted them to break these biases, to overcome these biases, and really try and understand each other's abilities, each other's challenges, strengths, weaknesses, and learn from the overall experience. The second objective was for them to really understand what diversity leads to. Diversity leads to better products because you're now considering perspectives or ideas that you've never thought about. You're now thinking about problems that you'd never thought were problems. So we wanted them to appreciate the beauty of diversity and how that leads to better products and better product development life cycles. And finally, the third objective was for participants, especially the sighted participants, to try and understand accessibility hands-on and bring it back to their organizations. It's one thing to take an accessibility course or an accessibility brown bag, but it's completely a different thing to actually see that in action. Because now the product that you're developing will be unusable by your own teammates if it's not accessible. So we wanted them to see how those changes, those 2 or 3 lines of code that they were writing to enhance the accessibility of their apps, the transformative impact that could have in helping that product now being usable by their own teammates. So we wanted them to really take this knowledge with them and understanding with them so that they can now be the champions for accessibility at their respective organizations.
At Vision 8, one of the programs we run is to train visually impaired students skills in the programming languages. So students stay with us for 1 or 2 semesters, each semester lasting about 3.5 to 4 months to learn programming. And we find that once they learn programming, going to these hackathons is an excellent progression for them. So at these hackathons, they are able to connect with peers, they are able to connect with people from the industry, with students on college campuses, and they are able to build exciting projects and actually understand what it is to apply academic skills into building practical solutions. And in some cases also getting connected with employment opportunities. So these hackathons have been a real asset to Vision 8 and a boon to our students.
The Inclusive STEM Hackathon provides corporates with their unique opportunity to witness the vibrant space which is ideal for the development of inclusive technologies. Secondly, it allows corporates an opportunity to recognize the talent and capabilities of these passionate individuals who are so determined to overcome their challenges and focus on their strengths instead. And thirdly, it allows the corporates to absorb the learnings from the hackathon, go back to their workplaces, and implement the accommodations that are required so that they may be able to employ talented individuals and provide them with an opportunity to bloom to their full potential.
Yeah, so that was one networking. The other is the Ananda volunteer program which we started. So it's basically, see, when we study, we go back home and we have somebody to tell us to go back, do our homework, somebody to follow up with us on, whether we understood something or not, right? Encourage us when we do well, scold us when we don't do well, right? All these things are there, part and parcel of growing up. Most of the schools for the blind are residential. The children stay in school. They're a very happy lot, no doubt, but they don't get that reinforcement. So we started this program where we go over weekends with the volunteers, sit down with the children with their books, and we've given each child a book now. So we take the book, a volunteer comes with a printed book, and we go through the material that was done in class over the week and reinforce what was done in class. So this is a big hit among the children, and they love their guides. And a couple of recognitions here which Vidya has brought to Vision Empowered. She won the Namma Bengaluru Award. She also won the TIE Delhi NCR Award, and I think 3 or 4 more other awards which I don't have right now.